Hello, everybody, and welcome to This Week in X. We are here to discuss X-Force issue number 15. It was an issue out on the 16th of December, 2020. And if you're looking for another issue that's out the week of the 16th of December, 2020, check out the other videos on this channel. But to dig into this one, I'm joined by my colleagues, Tyler and Harry, and we have a warning for you. This is going to be spoiler-filled. We're going to talk about everything there is to talk about with this issue and all the issues that have led up to it in the entire history of the X-Men franchise. So you have been warned, and let's dig in. First things first, with X-Force 15, let's just talk about our first impressions, and then we can get into the meat of this issue. Tyler, first impressions.
I like that many things are happening in this issue. You have the beginning of a story, you have the ending of a story, and you have something that is developing halfway. The problem I have with it is that some parts of the story seems to be wrapped up in a really hasty way and in not a very satisfying way. And I feel like the 10 of Swords or the X of Swords crossover is clearly the most disruptive to X-Force at this point.
Out of all the titles.
Yeah. Because that happened, I mean, the previous issue of the stories is, stopped at a cliffhanger. And then we went on to do the crossover. And then when we came back to this, there is a little bit of a loss in momentum. And I have trouble placing when the interrogation scenes happen. Did it happen before or after the crossover? I mean, I feel like it's before, but.
Harry, what about you?
Yeah, I didn't like this. I think it's to Tyler's point. I think a lot of the momentum was messed with the crossover, and but I think what we're dealing with now with Omega Red and Beast, it's just not totally working for me. It feels kind of perfunctory, and I have a lot of thoughts about Beast in this series and whether or not we're supposed to care. I don't, which is disappointing because all the books so far have been really fun, but. Yeah, this just felt like we're back to business as usual, and I found myself thinking, why do I care about any of this business? It really, it just didn't do a lot for me.
I guess I'm having something a little bit similar to that, but I'll frame it a little bit differently, which is that I think the book is asking an interesting question, which we're going to dig into as our first topic, which is, what is X-Force really? What is it philosophically? What role does it serve? Who should it be? But because it's asking that question from the position of having really exploded its cast, like the last couple of pre-X of Swords issues were very like, Domino's doing this, Colossus is doing this, Beast is doing that. And because it has quite suddenly become so interrelated with Wolverine as a title, it kind of feels like I don't even understand what this is really. Like, what am I here for? Who is the star? What is it about? Like, I just felt really confused, and I kept trying to give it back the benefit of the doubt because I've really liked it up until X of Swords, and I do like all these individual cast members, but I just found it kind of a little bit lacking center. Couldn't tell if I was supposed to feel like Beast was the center or Jean was the center. And not that every book needs a prohibitive title star, but I just felt like it was lacking a little bit of gravity in terms of what is this really about. Now, as the first issue of an arc, maybe that's fine. And, when you read it in trade, maybe it's going to make a lot of sense. But as an individual issue, I think it left me feeling a little bit wanting.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even the first issue of an arc. Is the ending of an arc, is the beginning of an arc, and
you can feel the split in the middle.
Yeah.
It like just snaps into like a Kit Kat. Like it's just
the transitions narrative wise is really chunky.
And that's a great point about just the teams kind of being at every which way all over the place, and us not being able to kind of have a focal point to kind of latch onto and enjoy. I think this team more than any is just, it doesn't really feel like a cohesive unit. And I do kind of forget where other people are while I'm reading it, which isn't like a terrible thing, but it is like always slightly disorienting. And again, going back to the crossover, like I did, I had to remember mid-issue that we did end on a massive cliffhanger with Quentin Quire and what have you. Yeah. And it's just like, it just doesn't
here entirely.
Yeah, he's not here. I was like, so it doesn't really gel.
Mm-hmm. Well, just to pull that together a little bit, and then we'll kind of get into the whole what's going on in the issue. I think before X of Swords, X-Force in a way felt like the flagship. Like a lot of the big questions about what was happening on Krakoa were in X-Force while Hickman was doing these one-off stories in X-Men. And I think because X-Force's core stories were not X of Swords core stories at all. Now it's just very disorienting because it's kind of like, what are we talking about? Why does this matter? Like, it feels like X of Swords and the resurrection stuff and all of that was like such a big deal. And then we come back here and it's kind of like Beast is like, oh, we're just going to resurrect Omega Red. And it doesn't really feel like it connects to what just happened. So that's disorienting. Maybe within an issue, we're going to get back to it feeling like the center ring of Krakoa. And of course, I'm rooting for it because I've actually really enjoyed it, but it just doesn't feel like that here. But here's the interesting question, which is the other side of some of our reactions to this. What is X-Force? And now let's talk about it in terms of in the story, right? Because there's a big split, several splits really within X-Force here. There's the split of the enforcement side and the intelligence side, right? So Logan is extremely wary of Beast. He doesn't want to let Beast in and kind of the interrogation of Colossus, who's Logan's man, right? Colossus was part of the enforcement side of this body. So there's a split between the two sides. But then even within the intelligence side, there's a split between Beast and Jean. Jean, you just get the sense is like done with Beast. She says to him, you know, she won't let him in the interrogation. Wolverine's to keep him out. And afterwards, she tells him that Colossus is not going to ask for an apology, Beast, but I'm going to demand you give him one. Of course, I love sassy Jean, so I enjoyed that moment. But let's talk a little bit about the fracturing of X-Force and like what was it and what should it be, given how at odds all of these characters are with each other.
Well, it's the eternal question of these X-Force books, right? It's like, what kind of bad things will you do for a good cause? And in this context, it's what will you do to protect your nation? What will you do to protect Krakoa? You know, are you going to turn Omega Red into a sleeper agent and throw him out to the vampires and figure it out and tear Colossus's mind up and what have you? If it protects XYZ. And, you know, I think the book had a good opening start with the first issue showing Professor X getting shot and showing, hey, there are serious threats. We need to get, you know, dark and grim and gritty to fight these threats and what have you. I think it's like, it's a question we've seen in X-Force a lot over the last few series.
I really enjoy the way Beast is turning out to be kind of morally really, really gray.
It's deep into gray at this point.
Yeah.
He's pretty gray.
He is. And then I feel like Jean is basically saying, you know, I'm done with this. I can't stand this. And, you know, I'm done with the council too. I am an X-Men. And this is, I think, where she departs from X-Force. She's already done with like the council. So I think Scott and Jean is going to head another team. And that team might really be, you know, just superheroes type of stuff.
I'm interested in what X-Force means on the island. And I think anytime that we've thought back to a previous X-Force or any super tough version of the X-Men that we've had, whether it's been called X-Force or not, it's always in contrast to the X-Men, right? Like you always need one to define the other, not only from us as readers, but within the world, right? X-Force is doing something the X-Men are not willing to do. But now we've taken away the X-Men. We have all these databases saying like that the X-Men's a dirty word, don't call them X-Men, we're all just mutants. And even if they're not calling this group X-Force, like, yet they're still trying to build the structure around the void of where the X-Men are usually. And so it's creating interesting things. You know, you have a character like Colossus or Wolverine or even Jean who likes to operate in a much more straightforward way. And you saw that's happened in this title, right? Where like, she's like, let's go negotiate with them. Let's go talk to the ruler of this nation. But at the same time, the same group of people is in charge of the subterfuge side, which usually X-Men gets to like disavow more cleanly. So I think that this is really interesting because it shows that like in the birth of the nation, because it's the same people that are responsible for the same things, there's no clean break. And so you keep, they keep getting turned over and being on the opposite sides of each other because they're trying to like create this thing that needs the gravity of the X-Men in the middle of it. And to me, that's actually what makes this issue and all the previous issues and this new Jean and Beast split fascinating. It's not just like Beast is morally gray. Like we've seen that before. To me, it's kind of like Beast is trying to do this X-Force thing that he knows is required. Jean is trying to do this X-Men thing that nobody is doing. And those two strategies don't go with each other at all. So that's, I want to come back and talk about Wolverine stuff, but I want to see what your reaction is to that idea.
That's a really, really good way to kind of position this divide between ideologies, but then, I do think like, what does X-Force look like without a counterbalancing team? That's a really interesting idea. But of course, now we're going to have the X-Men again. So is that going to be followed up on and developed with Jean more, or is she going to stay relegated with this book? I mean, I think kind of seeing how it actually plays out kind of determines how much this idea kind of has weight, I guess, if that makes sense.
I mean, in some ways, I think Jean pushing Colossus into the Intel side is saying that Colossus can be that role. I am not 100% sure that he is the right person here.
Me neither.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, I feel like Colossus is really doesn't have a. Well, I mean, Percy doesn't have a pretty good. I mean, he has a good. He has a certain way of writing Colossus, which does not feel very right to me.
Sad.
Sad, suicidal, maybe a little bit.
He's definitely being written as very depressed.
Yeah.
Like he's not getting from Krakoa what so many other people seem to be getting from Krakoa.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also I feel that there's one scene transition here where Colossus walk away and Beast is like, oh, there's still one more thing, right? When I first read it and then the cut to the beach scene with Domino being the main character, the first thing that popped into my mind was that, oh, did Beast learn that Colossus actually changed Domino's wishes instead of the recruitment thing, which later it became what I thought that particular cut meant like Beast saying that, oh, there's one more thing, I need to recruit you to my side, as opposed
but it almost implied that, like, if that was a movie and if somebody said, and there's one more thing, that would be in the next scene probably.
Exactly.
But here the one more thing was kind of meant as like, and now we're going to do that off screen and this is like a hard cut. In a movie we would have like cut to a more establishing shot or whatever, but because it cuts right in on Domino, it feels like that's what he's talking about. Almost, yeah.
So I wonder
even
if
the next panel. It's not like a panel of the beach.
No, it's not.
So it could be right. It could be a feint. Like the thing he need to actually talk about Domino, actually, which is not what Jean sent him to talk about,
and which is not what Jean wants as a replacement for her on the Intel side. So that makes this whole thing even more, interesting or more messed up. So
well, and also again, like I think this kind of rotates us back to where we started this part of the discussion. Jean is trying to make the X-Forcey side more X-Men-y. She sent Colossus. He's not going to do the thing to justify, the whatever the actions are. He's all hard. Yeah. Jean makes a good point that like he's well placed and he's in Russia and he can help you figure this thing out. But she, it's kind of like she's fundamentally not the right leader to be involved in that, even though I trust her as a character to be a leader of many things in X. But it's just an interesting statement about kind of like you can have amazing people with amazing talents, put in amazing effort, and they can still be the wrong person, which I think is really fascinating, in the modern day business context and when you need things from your friends, but also very much with these characters in comic books. Just because Jean is smart and competent does not mean she's going to get this right.
And Peter, because you are a huge Jean fan, let me ask you this question. Like when Jean chose to leave before the murder happens, what is your take on that?
Oh, well, let's get into it. Yeah. Is this Jean trying to stay ideologically pure, right? Is this her saying, I'm not, because she's done it before. One time she's gotten her hands dirty in this series and she was quite specific that she was like, I really do not wish to be here for this part of the mission. Yeah. So I absolutely read it that way. And I thought it's kind of like, how can she say that she's in charge of this group or has a say in this group and then be like, but I'm actually not going to stay here to get my hands dirty? It's really kind of proof that Jean doesn't fit in and we're going to continue seeing these gears grind, right?
Yeah.
That is a nice part of this book, is seeing the friction kind of get greater and greater as these personalities are just not clicking. It definitely feels odd. It's like as a book where like a big member of the team just doesn't fit, but like it is an interesting thing to chew on, which is something going for it.
But let's talk a little bit about that murder. Yeah. That murder, right? Murder. So, because there's levels. So For those of you who don't remember, and I went and had a refresher, even though I've read these issues many times over, Omega Red, rather than adamantium, the Russians couldn't figure that out, and so he has carbonadium, which is what his coils are made of. That's not his mutant power. They're like Wolverine's claws. He exudes like a death factor. It's a whole thing. But the carbonadium is unstable, and it slowly poisons him. And so he's constantly using his healing factor / death factor to replace that energy that the carbonadium is causing. And so he's always looking for this freaking MacGuffin, the carbonadium synthesizer, ever since his introduction by Jim Lee in 1991 and 1992. And so Beast's big revelation here is the vampires, who apparently have deep pockets and know everybody, put a carbonadium synthesizer in Omega Red, but he's under their spell. So we can break their spell, but then he's going to do whatever the F he wants because he's got the carbonadium synthesizer in, or we can try to use it to our advantage since he's assuming and he's ensorcelled to think that it's there, which I think created one of the most interesting things that's happened in X-Force, which is this data page argument between X-Force, Xavier, and the Five about if any of this is ethical at all.
We don't want to do this.
For it to come from the Five, which are like, basically young mutants except for Proteus.
Yeah, talk about it.
It's something.
It feels that way.
It is something because it's like, is it because the Five are morally more pure, or is it because they are just naive? And
column A and column B, like they do seem like children, especially in that framing of like the adults doing some darker things and the kids just not being comfortable with it. I thought that was a brilliant page. It really like you feel uneasy when you're realizing that Xavier's just railroading them and is like, we are doing this. That also, our X-Force is doing this.
Yeah, like counter objection. Like, at first it was just funny, but then when there was a counter objection, I'm like, oh no, this is actually really tense.
Yeah. It's like, geez, that's an interesting part. It's interesting seeing how this morally murky team plays with the rest of the island and sort of how they, you don't really see a lot of like how other mutants feel about this team and like, actions like this where they're kind of tweaking Omega Red in a pretty gross way, I feel, or something. It opens the door for more gross things.
Yeah, it opens the door for. I mean, in the name of national security, they can do anything.
But then, sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, I don't have to give any real life examples because everyone knows there are plenty of those examples out there.
But then contrasted with, as you rightfully brought up, Domino and Colossus already conspired to subvert a part of the resurrection protocols. That was not overt and as dictated by X-Force, but this whole book is kind of about what happens when the rules that we made for everybody shouldn't apply to everybody. And now, and even if the Five didn't realize it at the time, they were a party to that one too.
And now the problem, I mean, the other thing also is that it specifically says that this resurrection author is me, the Beast, not Omega Red. He has no say in this. So that, and then, and for Jean to say, I'm not going to be here to hear whatever plans you have, and for Beast to get the support from the, arguably the top man of Krakoa, that seems like a really dangerous precedence because he's getting support from the top man.
Yeah.
No, well, it's go ahead.
Oh, and just, that data page ends with Xavier saying, to clarify, unless otherwise noted, X-Force has absolute authority on this matter. But this brings us back to the top of the discussion. Who is X-Force? Because Jean left the freaking room. Wolverine is not trying to be an ambassador to anybody. No. Xavier is kind of and Black Tom is busy eating poop. So we've basically put Beast in charge of this entire operation by default here.
It's really, Beast has like he's just got a check to do whatever he wants, and he seems very into you doing whatever he wants. I can't imagine that'll go well, but Well,
and now comes the hard cut to what I refer to as beach
The
stuff.
beach scene.
So as Tyler, brought up earlier, this issue really just feels like two halves of something that's been snapped in two and doesn't go back together. And so then all this stuff happens, and the beach scene has been teased a little bit, but then it kind of all comes to a head. So Tyler, like, I even had trouble following it. What is your perception of what has been set up here and what occurs here at the end of this issue?
I mean, my sense was that Krakoa expelled something that he does not want. That, it could be a cancerous cell, it could be a tumor, or something that he basically say, this is hurting me, I'm going to expel it. And that's what that black blob is that he threw. Basically almost killed the children who were playing there because the cliff collapsed and things like that. And then for that particular cancerous thing to be alive and taking over living creatures, it feels a lot like Terra Verde. Because and because that is also plant-based, I wonder if spores or anything was sort of hitchhiking it back from their adventure there, where Black Tom was basically there to stop the entire thing. And I mean the entire X-Force team is there. And that brings me back to this whole issue of Krakoa not thinking through every step of the way, because there is no quarantine zone, there is no security checkpoint. It's just point-to-point Krakoa gates. So anyone can come in with a disease.
There's no biosecurity.
There's no security at all. And that, I mean, in real life example, that's how Australia got decimated. So much of Australia became a desert because of that. Because there was no check, there was no quarantine. They accidentally brought over, I think, rabbits, which has no competitors and which breeds like crazy, and basically, destroy a large part of the ecosystem before, people managed to stop it. And Krakoa is slightly different because it's living, it's a living creature. But, I think as we can see here, something happens that Krakoa doesn't want, and Krakoa expels out of himself. And that turned into something that is attacking, whatever living creatures it comes across. So, and poor Rufus.
Oh. Maybe he'll come back. You don't know.
And where's Pip? Well, Pip
questions.
is Domino's dog. In the most recent Domino series. So,
well, I'm glad it's not on the beach, because that wouldn't have gone well. Yeah, I am curious where the rot comes from, because this definitely feel, the idea of like something in Krakoa, some kind of rot affecting humans outside, and they're being careless and letting it happen. I mean, that does feel like something that be pretty interesting, and it fits well in this book and with this art style especially. I think that was drawn really well.
Well, and also, I mean, it is mirroring what's happening in the rest of the plot. I know I teased that like the beach scene feels separate, because I felt it hard to get a handle on what was the growth, why was the growth. I really needed Tyler to like walk me through if it could have been external or internal. But it is kind of metaphor, right, for like the poison that's within this whole team. Things aren't gelling. Jean departs, the island ejects this black mass. I mean, there are thematic parallels between these two pieces, and we end with yet again X-Force is repelling something from the shores of Krakoa, but this time it might be something that originated from inside of Krakoa, which is a very different spin to the vampires and the Russians and Terra Verde and all of these other things that they've dealt with to date.
Yeah, I feel like clearly this book's heading towards somewhere where like all these actions are going to have some kind of consequence that none of them are seeing coming. And I feel like maybe the rot could be that. I don't know if it's going to be relegated. I feel like someone's going to pay for some of this. I feel like it might be Beast. I don't think that's a crazy prediction to make. But yeah, I think you're right. It's kind of like a metaphor. It's pretty strong as a metaphor.
So he's going to be the pillow for Victor.
Yeah, I mean, he's in the book. He's like, I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm the best. And it's like, all right,
Well,
man.
this is
Because
the
none of his
second time
past
he said
decisions
that.
should have given him any
I
reason for
know.
pause.
Like, no, Beast, you've never been wrong besides like the last 10 years of Marvel Comics. Like, this has been your arc for a decade, man. Please just stop doing this.
But you know,
I think
I
that's
know.
why. Yeah.
Oh,
Go on.
go ahead.
No, that's kind of like just as a quality thing. That's just kind of thing I'm annoyed with Beast in this character, because it kind of feels like they're retreading the same ground with him a little bit, where it's just him feeling like he knows more than others. And like Bendis did this. This was a part of Hickman's New Avengers. Like, it just feels kind of familiar, but I guess that's his character now. So
well, and I really, for that reason, and because I know there are Beast fans out there, right? Like that really enjoy him. I really want to get to a point that this issue teases us getting to, where he says, look, you can go and play X-Men, but some of us have been around long enough where we know that we've got to do the things that are wrong. And I never thought I was going to be a member of X-Force, because if you think back to Fraction's run on Uncanny X-Men, he leaves because Scott establishes X-Force. And I think it would actually be a really full circle moment for Beast to say, like, you know, I've played the role of the person who thinks they knows best, but now I'm just doing what needs to be done, Gene. And I think that would actually really hit for me, because I would be like, whoa, there's a journey that Beast has been on since like 2009 that we've brought all the way around. So I'm hoping it's that, and it's not just like Beast knows best, but that he really recognizes that somebody's got to do it. To me, Beast thinking somebody's got to do it is a different version of that than Beast knows best.
I think, I think if he owns it eventually, that would be a really interesting place to take it. I hope that's what they do, instead of I'm the best and I'm going to keep making great choices and it'll never come back to haunt me or anyone on Krakoa. Never. But yeah.
So final appraisal of this issue, did digging into some of the thematic stuff help us warm up a little bit on it, or are we still a little uneven on this issue of X-Force?
I like this book a lot more now that you've kind of made your pitch about it, Peter. No, I think it's got a lot of great parts. It's got a lot of interesting stuff. I love the art. I love how, as an aside, I love how cavalier the book is with how expendable these bodies are now in this new world where you can regrow someone. So Quentin Quire gets hacked up, or we just yank something out of Omega Red, and it's just like a neat thing. There's all these neat little things, but I don't feel like this issue in particular came together in any real way. I'm not gonna like drop the book, but I hope it picks up.
Tyler?
I mean, I am still about the same as I started. I mean, I don't hate the issue. I just feel like there is some it could be a lot smoother in certain areas of it. And I mean, I'm obviously a fan of Cassara's art, so I'm not complaining. And I can understand how, coming off from two really intense issues can be a little bit draining. And so, a little bit, I mean, the art is not bad at all. It's just not as good as the past two issues, because those past two issues were like excellent. It was like amazing.
It's the best part of the crossover. I felt just that art in those two issues. Like he owned it. So I agree. I think it's a little less strong, but it's still very good.
Yeah. And I just want to point out that, at least for me, the art, it's not that the panels weren't as good. It was that the paneling wasn't as good. Like, he did so many amazing page layouts and page breakups in there. This is a little bit more standard. Like, okay, let me follow the script a little bit more closely. But there are still standout panels. As we've been talking, I have these last two Beast scenes in front of me on the monitor. I love that scene of Domino looking out over the ocean from the low angle over Black Tom as the Sand Mermaid. That final page of everything bursting out of the waves. But then also earlier, like Jean putting her hand into Colossus's head, and then Colossus's final walking away and just all the reflection on his face. That's one of my favorite Colossus panels, I think, of all time. So I think there's great panels. I just don't know if it like felt as together. But to me, actually, to put a cap on it, for me, this is a lot how I felt about X-Force 1. I hated X-Force #1 before I really came around on this book. And it was for similar reasons. I didn't really feel like the art like quite all together came together. I didn't feel like the cast all together came together. So if this is kind of the start of X-Force year 2, and we're going to get stuff that was as good as year 1 in year 2, and we just needed this kind of janky issue to get us there, then great. So I look forward to another issue and seeing what the Krakoan language says at the end. Tyler, what does it say?
Sea monster.
Monster. So I'm interested to see if it really is a sea monster, if it's really been a Krakoa monster or a Terra Verde monster all along.
And also the funny thing is I kind of want to see a little bit more of Bro Forge.
Same. That's a great moment. I love Forge in this book. I want he's a lot of fun in it.
All right, well, hopefully more fun next time. Look, if you are looking for other issues that are out this week, we still have to talk about New Mutants, and we still have to talk about Wolverine, white, what is it, red, green, all the colors of the rainbow.
White, black, and blood.
Black, white, and blood. So if you're looking for those discussions, you'll want to look for other This Week in X videos on this channel. But for this issue, this is Peter, Tyler, and Harry signing off of This Week in X from Crushing Comics. Be well.
Bye.